Haringey in North London one Saturday afternoon last month. Supporters of the National Front gathered for a St George's Day march through Wood Green, an area with one of the highest proportions of blacks to be found anywhere in London.
And you're calling us the race list? Yes, I am a race list, and why? Who's made me a race list? This government, the Conservatives, and every sturdy, stinking councillor who sticks up for the and I am a race list. Now put that on your television, and I'll stand by my words, because I don't like these people, never will do.
Come on.
Our purpose is to destroy the multiracial society. First of all, an immediate halt to coloured immigration, and thereafter the phased repatriation of all coloured immigrants, their descendants and dependents from Britain to their lands of ethnic origin.
And if they don't go,
they're going to go.
In 1976, there was an incredible drought. It started off as, God, it's a great hot summer. I thought all summers were like this.
I remember the heat. That was the heat wave. That was the hottest year ever.
A life changed for me. In 76, I was 16. And I remember the hot summer very, very well. Very well. Anyway.
My goodness, even if you didn't like the weather, the music itself, in conjunction with the weather, well, it was a win-win situation.
The soundtrack to that glorious long hot summer was just one unforgettable song. You to Me Are Everything by The Real Thing.
You to Me just floated in. It just floated in to this gorgeous summer.
Didn't matter how hot it was, didn't matter how much you were perspiring, didn't matter how much water you needed. That song was your air conditioning.
That song seemed to be played on the radio all the time.
You to me are everything, sweetest song that I can sing, oh baby, oh baby.
You to Me Are Everything, you can't stop singing that song.
That song really reached out to everyone who experienced the same feeling in a really powerful way.
It is one of the greatest love songs. What nicer thing could you say to a partner than that?
The history books like to tell us 1976 was all about punk in London. But 200 miles north, 4 pioneering lads from Liverpool were breaking records as the first all-black British band ever to score a #1 hit.
It was outstanding, the level of success that The Real Thing had, considering that the way society was at the time.
They just opened up this love for black artists.
I think You to Me Are Everything is definitely a significant song, not only because it was the first #1 from an all-black singing band and a Liverpool band as well.
Here's a band from our streets that can do it every bit as good as the Americans that we've been brought up to listen to.
It's like, wow, and they're Scousers. What? It didn't make sense.
It took a band like The Real Thing that had a sound that at least could stand up to the best of what came from the United States.
A black group in the 70s from a regional place could be top-selling artists in the world.
Limousines here, there and everywhere, private jets to France, Italy. It was just like, someone please don't pop the balloon. You to Me stayed at #1 for 3 weeks. It sold, I think, in the region of 600,000 copies.
One of the greatest songs ever, and I think the fact that 45 years on, it's still as popular, tells its own story.
That's what I think makes a classic record, when you can hear it 10, 20 years later and it gives you the same feeling that you had then.
It's still as potent now to when you first heard it, but it also just takes people back to a time when things were nice.
My thing about You To Me was, it's a nice song, but is it going to do the group any good? Obviously I was wrong.
The Real Thing may have been dominating the worldwide pop charts in 1976, but their story actually started 14 years before, in what was then the most racially divided city in Britain.
Liverpool's become a music city by the fact of its heritage and its makeup, but also by the fact that it's actually defines itself by music.
It's amazing how much great music has come out of Liverpool, but maybe there's a lot of dreamers in Liverpool who dream of better things.
That vibe that you just feel when you're walking around the streets, when you're speaking to different people, that feeling it gives you is also the feeling that I get from music.
As long as Liverpool's been a dominant music city, black music's been right at the centre of that.
Liverpool did have its own sound. There was a Mersey sound. I was happy with that.
The most powerful thing that Liverpool gave the rest of us young musicians was a belief in ourselves.
There was this British invasion, and it was led by the Beatles. So the sound was, to me, a real game changer from an American point of view.
These all-white bands were covering black music. It was very dominant in Liverpool, even before the Beatles, even before Motown hit globally.
Liverpool was very much one of the places in the whole wide world where slavery was in abundance. That could easily have been forgotten through history, but for the fact that four of the greatest, most popular pop musicians that the world has ever known came out of Liverpool.
I feel like sometimes people limit Liverpool's impact to the Beatles, but I do think that allows for a greater conversation.
All the influences had to be from America to be credible, and it was people like John Lennon and Paul McCartney changed that.
Liverpool might have been a really vibrant city musically, but I wasn't aware of it. I grew up in Toxteth, the postcode of which was L8. If I was going to be totally honest, we had no idea what was happening outside. There was no other Liverpool outside Toxteth to us because we wasn't aware of it.
It was very much the sort of village within a city. The whole mix of people were in Liverpool 8, LA, Toxteth.
My parents were African and on my mother's side, mixed race.
Because there was such a melting pot, you always felt comfortable, you never felt under threat, and we were all sort of in this mix.
When I was 15, 16, we'd all end up back in a place called Stanley House.
I look up to the guys from Stanley House. They were role models. There was young footballers, black footballers, and singers.
And we used to go there and sing, and we realised that we actually sounded quite good. The Chants actually came together quite by accident.
I think I bumped into Eddie Amoo. And I said, I'm thinking of starting a band.
The Chants were a doo-wop group, so they basically came out of that era of close harmony singing.
Guys would all gather together on the street corners and sort of like make songs up. Put together, that's doo-wop.
Quite by accident, the doo-woppers' lives were to be changed forever when they bumped into Paul McCartney at a Little Richard gig in September 1962.
Paul invited Joey to bring the group along next time that we're playing at the Cavern. We arrived down at the Cavern, Matthew Street, found the Beatles come strolling out of the dressing room, and Joey went up to Paul.
And Paul went, "Oh, Joe, blah, 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 blah." And the next minute, he said, "Let's see what you can do."
So we hesitantly started singing, and we finished the number, and they all started clapping, saying another. And we said, "Well, how can we do that? We've got nobody to back us. We've got no band. We'll back you."
And John had learned a few piano chords, so they could give us a little bit of bump, bump. We just took off from there.
So the Beatles backed us that night.
Even now, it sort of like takes my breath away thinking of just what it was like walking out to that jam-packed place, to that audience, and I'll always remember Paul saying, "We've got something really special for you," and on we trotted,
Do you remember how nervous we were? Because I can actually remember. I remember that.
I can remember.
my cheek.
I realised I should have been nervous, but I wasn't nervous at all.
The Beatles backed us on several occasions because what Brian Epstein done, he sort of like very, very informally managed us.
You know, it's amazing to think that the Chants, who never really made it, influenced the biggest hit-making group of all time.
The Chants, when you see footage of them performing, you understand that they were very good. They basically took that American model and they transferred it to the clubs of Liverpool, and they did it really well.
The Chants' biggest supporter was crusading Liverpool MP Bessie Braddock. In July 1964, she invited the boys to a lavish civic reception at Liverpool Town Hall.
If you look closely, you'll be able to see me, sort of like stuck in the back here. This little podgy face here is me, Eddie Amoo. I don't really need to tell you who that is, do I? But yes, it's Paul McCartney. And boy, we were having a laugh. We were hammering it up. I don't know why the Beatles took to us the way they did. It's just mind-blowing to think how your life can change on the flip of a coin in 4 years.
Encouraged by Paul McCartney and John Lennon, by the mid-60s, Eddie was developing into an accomplished songwriter. With the Chants, he recorded the first British pop song to address racism in post-war Britain.
I wrote the song for the Chants called Man Without a Face, and I was being heavily influenced by people like Curtis Mayfield, who in turn was heavily influenced by the whole civil rights movement which was happening at the time.
I saw the writing on the wall. The big bold letters preached hate. And yesterday, a man I'd never saw walked up and spat right in my face. I'm just a man without a face. A man with no identity. And I would gladly give my life to be someone.
Lyrically, Man Without a Face is about the unfairness of being black in a country that's predominantly white and not being treated in the same way as your white counterparts. By this time now, we were starting to realise that our group was being treated somewhat differently because we were a black group.
People didn't know how to market us in those days. They had no idea how to sell 5 black guys singing American-type music.
Kids nowadays don't know who the Chants were. They think the first band on the horizon was the real thing.
Whilst the Chants struggled to find that elusive hit single, on the other side of Liverpool, Eddie's younger brother had musical ambitions of his own.
When I was growing up, most of my childhood was spent outside of Liverpool Late. And in all honesty, I'd not really had anything to do with anybody black right through until probably when I got to 13, 14.
Christopher's experience is a totally different to mine because he's younger, he's a lot younger.
I always looked up to my older brother Eddie, and of course he was in the Chants. All I wanted to do was be like him, really.
Around about 1971, my baby brother Chris came to me and he said, I'd like to have a group as well.
When me and Chris met, we used to go to Chants gigs and used to watch them on stage, and I just thought it was amazing. The harmonies were amazing.
Dave and I first got together and decided we were going to sing. It was us at the beginning. It was Dave and I who formed the group. It was quite obvious to Dave and I that we had to get a singer. And that guy was Kenny. Kenny Davis was singing with a couple of bands around Liverpool at the time, so he knew how to project himself.
So we poached Kenny from this other band, and we used to rehearse him through the week, and so we became a trio.
Kenny could sing in tune, and we'd go on stage. It didn't matter what me and Dave were doing, we just had to dance and look pretty.
I think we always liked the Temptations, so we started drafting in other members. That's when we changed to, I think it was the Sophisticated Soul Brothers, SSB. So then after that we become the VPs, the Vocal Perfection.
Was it Vocal Perfection or was it the Sophisticated Soul Brothers? I get mixed up between the two. Do you know what I'm saying? They're both equally ridiculous, so it doesn't make any difference. That was actually the very, very beginnings of the real thing.
One of the new vocalists the band recruited was a wayward teenager named Ray Lake, who had been raised in a children's home in the suburbs of Liverpool.
I first met Ray in a reception centre in Liverpool, in Allerton. It was for kids in care. Ray was really a good-looking little kid, you know what I mean? And he had a good physical body, which was natural. You know, Ray would be sleeping in the staff quarters, not in a dormitory with all the other kids. Ray was rebellious all the time, do you know what I mean? And I think it's because of maybe what was going on in kids' homes that some of the kids weren't aware of. Once you become 18, they just throw you back into Toxteth, where they took you from.
Known for his innate musicality from a young age, Ray had little idea just how beautiful his distinctive voice was.
Ray Lake was a bit of a tearaway, to tell you the truth. But it was obvious to me, when I first met Ray and got to know him, that Ray had sort of like deep underlying problems. And I always felt, even from when I first met him, this is eventually going to end in tears, which it did.
When we first met Ray, we just thought, what a great singer. He was Smokey Robinson. That's who he was, I mean, his voice.
Yeah, and we heard him singing right away. Me and Chris went, he's got to be in the band.
I first met Chris with Ray. Chris had that look as if to say, I'm going to start a group here, mate, and we're gonna be good.
We became quite a serious unit. You know, we were young and things, but we were good.
And we were on Stanhope Street. We passed this house, and I could hear a song which I thought was a record. It wasn't. They came out into the street and carried on singing the song. And I was just blown away by it completely. There was no music there, it's completely a cappella.
It wasn't long before Ray's sweet harmonies and film star looks brought him to the attention of some of the prettiest girls in Liverpool's clubland.
Every time I saw him, he was with a nice, lovely girl, and never ever knew the other girls' names. The only one I ever knew was Gail.
When I was 15, I met Ray. We went to this club. It was a club black boys went because they played all this black music that we loved, and we went along, and they were called Vocal Perfection then. Ray was just, you know, he was just beautiful. He had a big afro, and he was really handsome. And then they came off stage, and there was a phone box in the middle of the club. I came out of the phone box, and there was Ray just coming towards me, and I said to him, "Hey," and he thought I said Ray. And we just started talking, and he called me up and he asked me out, and I went out. I think it was love at first sight for me. But when I was going out with Ray at the time, I was called a lover. That's what you were called if you were a white girl and you went out with a black boy.
The band gigged incessantly up and down the country, but needed direction. Then, in late 1971, they were talent spotted by legendary music manager Tony Hall.
Tony Hall was probably one of the most expert people on black music in this country.
He knew what a black group had to do to make their way in the music business.
Without Tony, I think we would have just been going round in circles.
I was the Real Things manager and friend for about 100 years. I first heard about this vocal harmony from up north. I went up to see them. Chris's vocals absolutely blew me away, and we signed them and got them on Opportunity Knocks.
Opportunity Knocks was like the X Factor of then.
The appetite that people have now for talent shows is exactly the same as it was then.
Opportunity Knocks at that time was presented by Huey Green. He was actually a very amiable person until you crossed him.
I can be a very unpleasant person if I want to be, if somebody is going to give me a rough ride.
There's so many different stories about Huey Green, whether he was racist, whether he was messed about in things that he shouldn't be messing about with, which I will not talk about.
I don't think he was a particularly nice man.
We were only kids. The only thing I saw of Huey Green was getting told to piss off.
I remember him being rather charismatic, I suppose. I'm not 100% sure. Well, I'm lying. I think I did actually go and audition once at Opportunity Knocks.
Inspired by the world's most famous fizzy drink, it was decided that the rather flamboyant-sounding Vocal Perfection would have to change their name.
Our manager, Tony Hall, thought at the time, this is not good because you're not vocal perfection in any way, shape or form. And people will play on that.
I was in my car in Piccadilly Circus, stuck at traffic lights, and I saw the Coca-Cola sign flashing up there with "It's the real thing."
We told the producers at that time that the name was going to be changed to The Real Thing. They were upset about it.
Before we were due to go on, you get called into Huey Green's office. He took one look at me and he gave me the biggest dressing down. Who do you think you are? This is my show. And by the way, who's told you to change your name?
You better sort this stuff out, this name with your management. You can't be changed. You can't be one name one time then another.
And your name's vocal perfection. You know, like that. And then an intro came on, and he went and walked down the stairs as if nothing had happened. So we had to go on and perform.
I remember back in 1972 watching the group on Opportunity Knocks, and I was so made up because they blew everybody away.
I think all of Liverpool were watching it because it was such an exciting thing. And then obviously when they won, that was just amazing.
If you won Opportunity Knocks, it was a gateway to a career. Not necessarily a gateway to a hit record.
I don't believe they got the publicity or the push that they should have got, that a lot of the artists normally get.
It was very, very difficult selling black music over here because that affected us, because our manager used to tell us how difficult it was.
Of course, being black didn't help. It was much harder to get a black band away, a British black band away, than a white group.
In Britain in the 1970s, to be a breakthrough or successful black British band or artist, I think would be incredibly hard. It's like, it was hard enough to walk down the street and get a job.
As a black artist or as a black person, there are not that many opportunities, although they're there, but you're not getting it. What do you have to do to get those opportunities? I don't know really, you just sort of, I guess, pray to God, I suppose that's the only thing I can say.
It was a period where they never took black musicians in the UK seriously. They never did.
Tony steered us in the direction of being original. Drop the covers, start replacing it with your own stuff, which Eddie was writing material at the time.
After Opportunity Knocks, we released a single written by Eddie called Plastic Man.
There is something I got to do.
It actually went into the lower part of the chart, so we thought we've cracked it.
Because we really believed in the song. The management, Tony, believed in the song. We really thought it was going to be a hit, but it obviously didn't turn out that way.
And we got Top of the Pops, which used to guarantee you a hit record.
Top of the Pops, you knew you were pretty much on your way.
And Jimmy Savile was the DJ who was introducing our part of the show, and he introduced us as the Plastic Men singing Real Thing, like a joke, you know.
And that, to us, completely destroyed it before it even got off the ground.
Obviously, it was frustrating not to have commercial success, but they're not a pop group. At heart, they're musicians.
Black acts in the 70s had to make a certain type of soul that maybe doesn't feel as timeless as some of the American soul that was made.
American music started coming over black artists in abundance, basically, but there was really none here.
If you saw someone performing, you automatically think they were American. You know, that's, I think, what everybody would gravitate to because they were black.
There were people who were doing their own thing, and I've got to mention here The Real Thing.
I think that in the story of black British music, there's always the question of the second-rate inferiority complex. So singing largely in American accents, because that is the vernacular of soul music. It won't really work in a Scouse accent or a Brummie accent. And then the way that people sound off stage when they're being interviewed, when they're speaking in their natural voices, there's a kind of dissonance there, there's a discrepancy, and that's problematic.
I mean, I remember the first time I heard The Real Thing speak. I was like, there's black people in Liverpool. You know, it was like, what? I didn't understand that they were all from, that all of them are from Liverpool.
A lot of people did think that we were actually American. And even today, we get people coming up to us and saying, I thought you were from the States.
The audience is like 100% or 95% white.
You get a lot of white fans coming out because they love the music.
They were at the shows, they bought the tickets, they'd been buying our records, and they were happy to see us.
Soul was the music that really integrated this country at club level. You'd go to soul weekenders, all-dayers. It was a great mix of people, black and white. And it's really the place where a lot of black guys met a lot of white girls, to be honest.
As they searched for commercial success in the mid-1970s, The Real Thing sought to redefine their sound, and this meant a change in the band's lineup.
Kenny Davis, I don't remember too much about him, but we always used to laugh and the group used to say how ugly he was.
Kenny left the band because we felt that we'd moved on vocally.
Kenny ended up being fished out of the Mersey. He fell into the river late at night and basically drowned.
When Kenny left the band and we became free, although we had a great sound and although we were well suited, I always wanted Eddie as part of the band.
Initially, it was Chris, Dave, and Ray that I knew as The Real Thing, and then Eddie turned up. I thought, well, you know, they sounded good without Eddie. They sounded better with Eddie.
As soon as Eddie joined the band, things changed for Ray, and I don't think he ever got over that resentment, really.
If you were going to look at the hierarchy of the band, I would say it would be Eddie, Chris, then Ray and Dave.
As the New Look group continued writing and recording songs, they stumbled upon a new revenue stream, recording music for radio and TV commercials.
I came into contact with The Real Thing because of an introduction to their manager, Tony Hall.
When Jeff Wayne first came into Tony Hall's office, he was actually looking for the Chants because he wanted some voices on his jingles.
Jingles were advertisements. I did Cadbury's Dairy Milk and I did Wrigley Spearmint Gum, Lloyd's Bank, Carlsberg Lager. And it was a way of earning money.
I was just blown away by not only their own sound, which they were able to do live, and we'd work out harmonies together, but Chris Amoo's lead voice was stunning.
Jeff Wayne captured my voice in a way that nobody else had captured it.
Whenever there were commercials, whether just Chris as lead or the whole group, they were where I'd go to for a wonderful vocal sound.
Jeff Wayne was so impressed with The Real Thing's sound that he gave them the opportunity to record vocals on one of the most iconic British albums of all time.
Jeff Wayne was come up with a project called War of the Worlds, which he wanted us to be on.
It required different vocals, and the versatility of The Real Thing, they were my go-to, vocalists, and thrilled that they participated on it.
We done the album with him. Chris done all the vocals on a lot of the main songs on the album. I think Forever Autumn, right? I'll always remember Christopher's vocal on that is like out of this world.
And when I listened to it, I thought, gosh, the songs turned out really well, but it's not working for me in context to the complete work.
But for whatever reason it was, our voices were taken off.
So we lost what became a virtually sort of like legendary album, you know what I mean? And that still grit me teeth today when I think about what we lost there.
But it's one of those things that get away and you regret it forever. Yeah, we were really pissed off about that one.
Through Jeff, the group was introduced to one of Britain's most adored stars, pop sensation David Essex.
David was not only a really distinctive singer, he could act, he of course was very handsome.
Jeff liked our voices so much that he introduced us to Dave. The rest is history, really. Dave Essex immediately invited us to do backup vocals for him.
Initially, they were introduced by Jeff Wayne, who was producing my albums at the time. And he said, I'd like you to hear this group from Liverpool, 4 black boys from Liverpool 8.
Dave took an instant shine to us because we were just like young guys from, urban background like him.
He's just like, he's our hero. Give us the break we needed.
I think David Essex really admired The Real Thing, and I think he was aware that they made him sound better, definitely.
They gave a great texture to a lot of the records we made.
So Ray took me in the recording studios, and it was a great experience because you spend the whole day there.
They'd go off in a huddle and, you know, I say this, what Jeff Wayne would say, this, that and the other to them, come back, and it would more or less be there.
And Ray had a reputation of being one-take Lake. He could, you know, do a song in one take.
When I first heard about The Real Thing, I saw them performing on a TV show with David Essex. And I wasn't interested in him. I want to know who the black guys are behind him. You know, wow, you know, they sound really good.
And then he invited us to do live backup vocals, and hey presto, man, to work in front of like a couple of hundred people. When our Ailes called, there was about 15,000 people in there, you know.
Dave's great to us. He really helped us. I mean, for those tours that we'd done, that's what got us into the public's eyes, yeah.
When the band were backing David Essex, that was a really exciting time because we, you know, I'd go along to see them back David Essex, and they were really good. I mean, they made David's show.
Bands like us, ourselves, young black groups, up and coming, we didn't have any kind of platform whatsoever. We'd been given a chance to sort of like reach this huge audience, and it was a key part of The Real Thing's success.
Joining David on tour in America, the band was soon to experience a musical epiphany.
David asked us to go to the States with him, but he said, the thing is, guys, we can't take your backing band with us. What we do, we'll get you some musicians. And so we rehearsed these guys the day after, whatever. They kicked our asses. They woke us up. It was Miles Davis's backing band.
We were playing at the Bottom Line in New York, and in the audience was Rod Stewart, Britt Eklund, they were all there.
We were asking their advice about how we should present ourselves. To drop the suits, drop the routines, just be yourselves, guys. And that's what we did. We just went last week here, done the gig with them, and it rocked.
That was when we became un-Americanized. That was when everything American in us was gone.
Despite their success on tour, Ray's mental health problems were becoming more and more apparent to those around him.
After the gig, and we were staying away somewhere, we get in the hotel room and we'd have a couple of beers and we talk about things, and he'd tell me about that stuff, about being passed around from foster home to foster home.
Ray did have a lot of unresolved emotions there, which came out in anger, especially when he'd had a drink.
Because Ray was a wild child. He just wanted to have fun.
Ray Lake, he didn't have an off switch.
These guys he mixed with in the David Essex band, they all liked, you know, to have a smoke. They were smoking hash together. He was always stoned. He'd always have a joint. You know, he'd smoke all the time.
He did give me a couple of joints. He did give me a puff.
In the mid-70s, there were a lot of drugs around. So it was up to you whether you wanted to be involved in that.
You go backstage and everyone have a bit of cocaine and snorting coke. I never saw David Essex snort coke, by the way. It was like being part of a big family.
He enjoyed it and he burnt out in the end.
Chris was always having to go to the local police station to get him out. He used to get drunk and things, you know.
We were doing a video with David Essex, and Ray was missing. He went missing during the break. Next thing you knew, all this glass and everything started getting broken. That was one of the first inklings that we had that Ray wasn't like us.
By the end of the David Essex tour, The Real Thing were being lauded in the fledgling British black music press as the next big thing.
Black Echoes was really important because it provided a source of information. If you wanted to keep abreast of current events in black music, Black Echoes was the go-to magazine.
You had to read the magazines to actually find out, like, The Real Thing, where they came from, what they were all about.
Black Echo, at least I must say, give them their dues, they did support the black musical contingent in the country very much. Big them up, Black Echoes.
Black Echoes you bought to see what was going on. And a lot of the bands that we aspired to were written about in this magazine. And we never actually thought the day would come that we ourselves would be on the front page.
The music papers might have been supportive of the new wave of black entertainers, but on British television, it was a completely different story.
The story of black people in British media in the 70s was one largely of stereotypes. There's a failure to really represent us as accurately as we should have been represented.
Back then, it was such a big thing to look and see a face on there, somebody that looked like you, representing you, if you like, that was on that box. Very important.
We're not being presented as three-dimensional characters, yet at the same time, the only crumb of comfort that we had, certainly in our household, was the fact that there was somebody there on TV who we could directly identify with.
You'd hear the word wog in comedy, spade, coon, in comedy. You know, you're just like, it was normal.
You weren't represented on TV with these programs because you're only there for a minute. You know, you're Black History Month for a moment. I'm black every day.
It was like when there's a black face on telly, you phone a friend, have you watching BBC Two? It was like that, and it was real. You hear every black family saying this, and it did happen.
I bought the first colour TV in our house, actually, and a video recorder. And I had one tape that I had on there that had black people written on it. And it used to sit in the recorder, and when Top of the Pops was on, as soon as a black act came on, in went that tape, and I would tape everything where I would see somebody black on TV.
And it was something to look forward to, hoping that there'd be a black face on Top of the Pops this week, because you never know until you watched it.
The following few are feeling fine because they're this week's Top of the Pops.
It was one of the main places where you could see a positive representation of black people.
That was a space where we could be more empowered as people of colour in Britain. So we can have British groups, black British groups, and we can have black American groups telling their stories on their own terms.
By early 1976, and with a string of flop singles behind them, the Real Thing's luck was to dramatically change when they met London-based songwriters Ken Gold and Mickey Den.
The interesting thing about Mick and I as writers was we were both pretty much equally talented in many ways. Generally, we would just sit down with 2 acoustic guitars and just strum away until we hit on something that we both liked.
I was 26 when we wrote You To Me Are Everything, and I just came out with the line, You To Me Are Everything, and Ken said, that's good, yeah, well, yeah. And then retrospectively, we thought, shouldn't it be You Are Everything To Me? But it's quirky. It's got more of a character than You Are Everything To Me, which is bland.
Them songs are written in minutes, you know. Ideas come, the lyrics come, the melody comes.
Very simple lyrics, you know, things don't have to be complicated and long words that you don't understand. You know, love is very simple in its essence, and that song really captures it.
I would have loved to have been in the writer's session when that was being written. And I would have loved to have known what was going on in the lives of the guys when those words came from here to here to here so that we could hear them.
You know, there are people who know how to write, but I know that the biggest and most endearing soul songs tend to be driven by sentiment.
But when you promise somebody that you're going to take the stars out of the sky, when you promise somebody that you're going to stop the rain from falling, I mean, these are acts of God. You are in love.
Whoever wrote those lyrics, you know, meant every single syllable.
Did we get that on cassette? Yes. Okay, good.
I thought when we wrote You To Me Are Everything, I thought that was the best song we'd written so far, you know, as a partnership.
It was the 10th song we wrote together. I knew about this group, The Real Thing, and I thought they were a pretty good group. I was trying to get them to record one of our songs, so I got to know their manager, Tony Hall. As soon as he heard it, he said, I love this, I want to do it with The Real Thing.
I just happened to be in the office. So he puts this song on and starts playing it. Me and Tony look at each other. We had it signed, sealed and delivered before he left the office.
literally within the next hour, we started making arrangements to go in the studio. Tony, right out of the blue, said, do you want to produce it, Ken? And I'd never produced a record.
Anyone can tape a voice, but some people, they know where to take you to get its best level, and Ken Gold was one of those people.
Probably over all the years, all the people I've worked with in the studio, I would say that Chris Amoo and Billy Ocean were the best two.
With Chris' voice, you know, sometimes you hear a song and the song is suited to the voice of singing it, and this was one of them songs.
Chris Amoo is probably, for me, pound for pound, the best black British soul singer. I can't think of any others.
You know, my voice was really more thin and clear and thin, but his was like this sort of husky sort of voice where you always think, is he going to make that note?
That became an identity. That's when you heard that voice, you knew it was a real thing.
I am surprised that sort of on a global scale, his voice hasn't been more sort of recognized, because it certainly is right up there with any of the great, say, American artists.
No matter where you are, when you hear that voice, you know that it's Chris from The Real Thing.
On the 14th of May 1976, You To Me Are Everything was released in the UK, signifying a golden era for Eddie, Chris, Dave and Ray.
I could always spot a hit, and I knew that You To Me Are Everything was going to be a big hit.
The day it was released, we were actually working in Earl's Court with David Essex.
I always knew, even then, when they were doing backing vocals for me, that they would strike out on their own. I mean, they were just too talented.
You go into the studio with something that sounds like a hit. 99% of the time, the opposite is true. You To Me is released. Big deal. We thought, here we go again.
When I got that first phone call that morning, that it come into the top 40, and we were getting top of the pops, I didn't even have the bus fare to get into our manager's office from Hampstead.
After getting over the shock of it, getting in the charts on the first week of release, I think the next week was the most astonishing thing, because it went from number 22 to number 5.
And 2 weeks later, it was number 1.
Even though they didn't write it, I don't think it should overshadow the accomplishment that they had. It takes a great artist to pull off a great song.
These were kids really from the ghetto, really from our area. And number 1, you know, that you would never have dreamt that.
Anytime someone's breaking a record in music or anything like that, we should definitely hold high regards, especially in this city.
There was a sense of pride from me about them having a number 1 single.
When they hit it big, yeah, you suddenly think, crumbs, you know, we've worked together a lot, and then look at them, top of the charts.
Having them be at number 1 and not be American, that was one up for the UK, so to speak.
This song, this record, altered my life, altered my kid's life, and so on and so forth.
There's no doubt that You To Me Are Everything changed my life.
Ken and Mickey, thank you, opened the doors for us.
It seems like everyone knows the song, and that to me it's almost an indescribable feeling.
Instantly, dun, 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 dun. As soon as that starts, people know it.
So You To Me Are Everything is still one of the top 10 requested songs at weddings, and that doesn't surprise me at all.
You To Me Are Everything is a perfect wedding song. They hit the nail on the head.
You realise it's not just a song, it's not just a hit record, it's not just a number 1. This is a backdrop to people's lives.
Britain may have taken The Real Thing to their hearts, but getting a hit across the Atlantic proved to be more problematic, as American artists sought to record their own versions of You To Me Are Everything.
There were 3 versions of You To Me Are Everything on the Hot 100, one of whom was Frankie Valli, which was not a great version.
It was just horrible. It was the cover version from hell. Yeah.
It destroyed our chance of sort of like breaking in the States.
Not Frankie Valli, not nobody has reproduced that magic, and no one ever will. And that's what a record's all about. Magic.
With You To Me topping the charts across Europe, the hunt was quickly on for a follow-up hit.
The obvious question was, now what? You know, obviously we were hoping we were going to get to write the follow-up. It wasn't a given that, you know, they wouldn't find another song.
It became a very urgent matter. And instead of Mick and I writing something new, we looked through other things that we'd written, and we found this song called Can't Get By Without You.
Take 1.
It was geared as a sort of Barry White type song.
When I heard it, I sort of thought, this is fantastic. I just loved it. You know, that sort of like Barry White's type intro.
When I heard Can't Get By Without You, it had to be the following.
When I leave your door.
I was knocked out with Can't Get By, even more so, in actual fact, than You To Me.
That was one that we knew was going to be a hit. We just knew it.
Can't Get By Without You probably would have been a number one. We were held off the top spot by ABBA. We were beaten by the Swedes.
The Real Thing's newfound success brought them thousands of devoted female fans, the vast majority of whom were white teenagers.
We had a very, very strong relationship with our fans in as much as that, like, the girls actually loved us.
I think our fan base was predominantly female because of the type of songs were romantic.
I suppose that road to ladies being interested in them was initiated by coming on tour with me to a certain extent, you know, and that carried on into their own career, which is brilliant.
Dear Real Things, the question that I'm going to ask you is a very personal one, and I hope you don't mind. I want to know if all four of you are still virgins, and how old was you when you first had it? And did you enjoy it?
I'll never forget running down Waverty Road with a whole gang of like teenage girls running after me, boy. And I thought, Jesus Christ, I don't believe this. I don't believe this is happening.
The Real Thing audiences tended to be white. We hardly saw any blacks. It was all whites. They loved them.
So we went to see The Real Thing. We really loved them very much, and we went backstage and got their autograph, and I think we got a peck as well. And we had, you know, proper crushes on them. We thought they were the cutest things on earth.
We used to get all that, the knickers and the bras and stuff, and it's good to have your ego massage every now and again.
Compared to their distinctly less attractive white counterparts, The Real Thing dazzled with their good looks, stylish clothes and toned physiques, and made history as the first black British pinups for teenage girls.
You know, as a young girl, I probably would have been saying, let me see which one of these guys I fancy.
I thought they looked very cool indeed, and very cute.
I can remember thinking, wow, what a gorgeous looking set of men.
Waistcoats with nothing on underneath, you know, biceps and good looking guys.
When I look back at some of the pictures of us half naked, you were selling a sex sort of thing.
I think Chris had a lot of sex appeal, but Ray is the one as well.
He was always the one that was pushed to the front to younger fans. The baby face, the baby of the band and all that stuff. But we knew what Ray was about. He was no baby.
With Ray and Chris in the band, basically the Teeny Bop magazines and stuff centred on them.
I think Ray's style is quite unique, really. He had quite a unique style. Really good body, never went to the gym.
Ray Lake, he was really athletic looking. He just had that shape, that Mr. Universe shape, if you know what I mean.
One of them was fair-skinned with an afro. And if I remember rightly, he'd wear a waistcoat. He was the looker, proper looker. The lead singer was a bit darker, a bit gravelly, hairy chest maybe, I don't know. He was the hetero, full on. Alpha.
Chris that had an open waistcoat and the hair on his chest, and he used to wear this hat to the side and the moustache and the bit. Oh my God, they were gorgeous.
The coolest one I think was Chris, because Chris had the hat.
Our manager lent me the money to go and buy a hat in Bond Street, and that was an expensive hat, but worth every penny.
And the ladies liked him because he's not an ugly guy. The ladies liked him. I'm sure he pulled more chicks than I did, but never mind.
The lead singer, he's very handsome, and he was a snazzy dresser as well. But when he sang and he felt like he was singing to me, honestly, he was handsome.
We like to be a bit daring as well as different.
The fact that The Real Thing were on the cover of magazines, topless, flexing their muscles, looking very buff, were basically saying we're black men and we look good. If this is a threat to white male sexuality, then that's your problem.
In answer to your question, I like being looked at. Okay.
Back home in Liverpool, The Real Thing were rightfully awarded superstar status.
Some music press referred to The Real Thing as the Black Beatles. You know, obviously the link to Liverpool, you know, 4 good-looking males from Liverpool making great music.
When people call us the Black Beatles and things, it depends on which way they mean it, you know.
Once again, that might have overshadowed them or put a bit more pressure on them, but I think that's an honour.
I don't understand it, but I appreciate it if they're doing it in a positive sort of way, you know.
I didn't think of them that way personally as the Black Beatles. I think the reference came because they're from Liverpool. But where I came from, the real thing broke through for me when they got that #1 record.
When you've got fame and you're young, the first thing you want to do is try and realise a lot of the things you dreamt about.
Fame was easy. Very easy, let me tell you.
Sometimes it works in your favour, the fame, but not to abuse it.
Ray loved the attention, he loved the stardom.
Because you've got some money in your pocket now, you can do a lot more things with it. And I think Ray was using it in the wrong way.
From what he'd gone through in his childhood and being in children's homes, I think that gave him a sense of being who he was, like a part of the band and being like a part of a family.
The band concluded in astonishing 1976 by winning Best New Group at the inaugural British Rock and Pop Awards.
When it came to doing the follow-up to Can't Get By, which would have been the 3rd record we'd made together, Mick and I actually sat down and wrote something.
We thought we'd try and include all the elements of the other 2, which is whether we did or not, I don't know, but we were very satisfied with it. They recorded it, sung it great again.
I called Tony Hall and was informed that they weren't going to be putting out Someone Ought to Write a Song About You. They wanted to put out one of their own songs, record one of their own songs and put that out. So, of course, I felt quite annoyed about that.
I think, personally, we should have, for the 3rd single, probably done Someone Ought to Write a Song About You, babe. Because it would have been huge.
We were very, very good songwriters ourselves, so we thought it was worthwhile taking the gamble and for the 3rd single coming up with something completely different.
I love that song, Never Know What You're Missing. What a great ballad. You never know what you're missing. And Chris, his delivery of it, and then the rest of them was just standing there so motionless and so cool.
Even though it wasn't a #1 or a top 5, and we'd written. So that immediately gives me and Eddie the sort of confidence. We know we can write a hit song.
We wanted to be taken seriously as a band, as a creative force.
If I see an artist, be it black or white, did they write the songs? I always find that very important because I believe that if you write, it gives you that sort of longevity.
Buoyed by the chart success of You'll Never Know What You're Missing, Eddie and Chris made the decision to write more socially aware songs, reflecting what it was like to be black in 70s Britain.
If you were black in this country in the 70s, then you basically had a strike against you. There was a distinct disadvantage. Inevitably, that will lead to a degree of alienation.
It was rough. You had the right-wing skinhead movement, and if you were a young teen growing up in Britain then, it was a tough time to be around.
There are places in Liverpool where we couldn't go if we didn't want to hear words like coon and wog. You just stayed away from them places.
So no one was going to call me. Do you understand? Nobody was going to call me that.
I was really frightened. Even the police were telling me to stay in my own area.
You're part of society that isn't really seen, you're largely invisible. So if you transfer that to the music industry, then you have an additional burden because you're already seen as an anomaly. You're called Black British.
So when you think that the real thing were the most successful black music act in Britain in the 1970s, even though it was quite late in the day, it's massive.
After the success when You To Me took off, we all got pretty much decent cars. I was pulled in that all the time. But the first time I got pulled in it, and I said to the police officer, the busy, why are you always pulling me in this car? And he basically turned around and said, your face doesn't fit.
A policeman could do what he wanted to do to you if he wanted to.
The racism I felt and was on like the bad end of was from the police, to be blunt and honest. In as much as that I don't know how many times we were on the road and our car would be stopped, we'd be pulled over, we'd be searched.
They drive past you, they see blackface in the car, nice car, let's have a move and find out what this is about.
I've been dragged out of a car, right? I've been told to sit in another car with policemen in the back for absolutely nothing but the fact that we're 4 or 3 black guys driving home from a gig. The last time was a month ago.
By the end of the decade, politics was gradually taking centre stage in pop, with groups like the Sex Pistols and The Clash putting their frustrations about British society into their music.
As musicians and artists who are going through a certain racial struggle, it's important to tell your story, and if you're a musician and artist, that's how you're going to tell your story, and that's how you're going to express your struggle.
The younger kids didn't feel that they could connect or that they fit in this country until they had people like Janet Kay, you know, the Queen of Reggae, and these type of people that they could identify with and were singing songs that they felt were speaking for them.
Because we didn't have any black politicians, the musicians were the people that we looked to.
In some instances, it's very important to put, politics into pop music. Politics of awareness.
Everything belongs in music. It's the cauldron of it all. Yeah, put it all in the pot and see what comes out.
If you have a platform, then use your platform.
After the Queen's Silver Jubilee, The Real Thing finally grabbed the moment to unleash a record which would revolutionise black British music forever.
In 1977, we felt it was now time for us to make that giant leap.
I don't know if it's a good thing to have a string of hits and then maybe become so known for them that you can't do anything else.
We had like a very, very big teenage bass, but our problem was turning that bass into serious fans.
4 from 8 came about. That was the first album that we'd recorded after our association with Ken Gold.
A very brave move on their part and on the record label's part for that period of time.
4 from 8 was all they stood for. It's all about their hometown, Liverpool, all about the district they come from, the struggles.
They were very, very aware of their surroundings, where they were from and who they were.
The musician is somebody who is able to relay his daily experience and reflect what's happening around him. He's holding up a mirror to society and to his community and saying, well, this is us.
Well, the idea of the album is that if people can listen to the music and relate to it, they realise that although it's pretty heavy round Liverpool 8, there are more than one way to go, and it's like a warning, really, as to what can happen.
A lot of people didn't know there was such a black community in Liverpool to begin with. A lot of them didn't know they were suffering in the same way, or it was just a neglected community.
That's shown that they still had, they had relevance despite their success on a community level.
We went in and we recorded an album, and we assembled a great collection of songs.
Children of the Ghetto, Stanhope Street and Liverpool 8 are what we call the Liverpool 8 medley, which lets people know that there's something a little bit more to the group than just smiling pop songs.
And the record company had decided to concentrate on the trilogy that we'd written about Liverpool 8, Toxteth.
They promoted it, they really got behind it, and that it was great for us. It was great for our heads.
It's like, okay, you're doing this sweet, quite light soul pop song, and then you go on to do that, which has a much harder reg. That's a great story.
We were over the moon because the record company really did spend a lot of money and sort of a lot of time promoting this album, and we really did think then that we'd broken that barrier, we'd broken that glass roof, We were wrong.
Pi Records aggressively marketed the 4 from 8 album, but the band's teenage female pop audience found The Real Thing's new image far too tough to digest.
The first thing that I thought about the album before I heard it, when I saw the album sleeve, was, oh, it's a bit glum.
So maybe for mainstream pop pickers, it would have been a bit of a shock to the system to actually see them presented in this way.
Record sleeves at the time were meant to be colourful, And it wasn't.
That very uncompromising cover, which shows you what the ghetto is, this run-down urban sprawl, these demolished buildings. It looks like Liverpool after the Blitz or something.
I remember the day they went filming for the cover, Stanhope Street. You know, Ray's got the umbrella and it was raining. From Ray, there was a sense of pride in what they were doing.
You can actually see the work that the record company put into this. It was really unheard of at that time for a black group to get this kind of attention.
Where you come from is so important. How can you create this in your music? And their 4 from 8 album delivered that. It was critically acclaimed as a really original piece, and they went back to where they came from.
Record shops across the UK were overloaded with copies of 4 from 8, but despite all the promotion, it didn't crack the top 40 album charts.
It's difficult to say why 4 from 8 didn't achieve the success that they previously enjoyed. I would speculate and say that it was maybe a bit too raw and a bit too gritty.
I just think we were naive and we tried and it didn't happen.
I don't think people wanted to know about the racial side of things going on in music. They didn't want to hear that.
Anytime a black group is going to do something and they want to go into another area, you're not given, especially here, you're not given that platform.
It was very difficult to get any promotion on that. Radio people said it wasn't commercial enough.
It's really difficult in this country to make the real stuff and be rewarded for it.
It would have been difficult for that record to have been a hit purely because of that wasn't really what people thought about.
Is that a hit? That's a hit. Let's play that. That's a hit. That's a hit. Put that on. It's not, oh, I get what that band are trying. No. It's not about that.
Most of their public were expecting a poppy song or an album, so maybe it was a bit too deep, too soon.
As soon as the real thing, try to knuckle down and make something political or something more meaningful, no one wanted to know.
I think that when you look at these things together, so the combination of the sleeve, the lyrics, where they're coming from, philosophically, politically, it packs quite a punch.
I compared the 4 from 8 album to What's Going On, in a sense. They felt like they wanted to do something that was from the heart, from where they came from.
You can release anything like that today, that would be all acceptable. But then it was like we were pushing the boundaries, and people just weren't ready for it.
It's not worth trying to strive for the children of the ghetto fan base if your records are you to be our everything.
There are lots of albums that were great albums that flopped because people didn't hear them at the time.
And it's only in recent years, or relatively recent years, that 4 from 8 has got the acceptance and praise that it actually deserved at the time.
4 from 8 was a landmark album. At least with this now, people will think, what, they wrote that? Or they wrote that? Didn't know that. Well, now you do bloody know.
Over the subsequent decades, one song in particular from the album has become an enduring anthem for the black community.
The standout track on 4 from 8 is undoubtedly Children of the Ghetto. And we wanted something that really told the story of what it was like for kids living in Toxteth, you know what I mean? We wanted to sort of like get that message across.
When you listen to the lyrics, we are the lyrics. We are the lyrics of Children of the Ghetto.
Children of the Ghetto is me. It's us as a band. It's how we developed. It's what's happened to us.
It was our ghetto, but it could be any ghetto. And that's what made it so powerful.
It belongs beyond Liverpool. The world understands that record.
The ghetto is a word that we always associate with American inner cities. I don't think people in this country ever assumed there were any such thing as a ghetto in Britain.
It didn't matter where you were from. If you lived in that kind of environment, this record made sense.
I think it was hugely courageous of The Real Thing to actually use the word ghetto in 1978, because part of the condition of being an ethnic minority is invisibility.
It's a real anthem of strength. And for the time when it was written, it was ahead of its time.
It's one of them songs that it just comes to you. It envelops your whole soul, body, and spirit. It's something like sent from above.
it's intelligent songwriting. It's musically and lyrically.
So in 1978, I was 11 years old. I remember running up and down Kilburn High Road with my brothers and thinking it was the greatest place on earth. And there was something about that opening line from the song, Children of the Ghetto, running wild and free, which really struck me. I think when you get to the second verse and they come up with that brilliant couplet, Children of the Ghetto, always in the news, toughness is their motto, bitter is the blues. That's a very, very profound line. These words are really powerful. The bitterness that you feel because of racial discrimination, because of alienation. I think of the end of Nina Simone and Four Women saying, I'm awfully bitter these days. So bitter is a key word in terms of actually highlighting one of the traumatic aspects of being black in a post-slavery world.
The words are still extremely relevant today. You've got to keep your head up.
That was like us saying to people, aspiring young musicians in Liverpool 8, keep trying, keep aiming up.
Throw your shoulders back. Don't be ashamed of what you are. Don't let people put you down. Just because you're black, just because you're from the ghetto, doesn't mean that you can't.
Now, you could look at that line two ways, because we've basically changed that around over the years, because when we did it, we said, there's no inspiration to brighten up your day. Now we'll sing, there's just inspiration. Because now there is inspiration, because there's a lot of black artists, a lot of black musicians, a lot of black people who are doing things now.
Children of the Ghetto's immense power and poignancy can be attributed to Ray's unmistakable falsetto voice.
Is it a strain at all, singing that high?
No, it's a lot more awkward for me to sing low than it is to sing high, you know. So my voice is never broken, it's just the way I am. I'm not a freak. He's a mouse.
So it's not going to give out on us at some point in the future.
Oh, no,
It's feeling all right.
It'll be like that when I'm 65, I think.
Ray saw Children of the Ghetto as his song. It was almost like it was written especially for him.
His lead vocal really told the story of his own life.
So he sang it with such, ownership and with such pride and emotion. Yeah, it was very special.
But with Ray, you actually feel the pain. You actually feel how he felt.
And I think it's absolutely wonderful. Still gives me tingles when I listen to it.
During that time, they did a show in the Philharmonic, and normally it would be lots of white girls, the audience would be predominantly white. This audience were predominantly black. And when he was singing Children of the Ghetto this night, I mean, some of the black guys were just stood up giving him a standing ovation and whistling and, going, yeah, Ray, and for Ray, that must have been so awesome.
The record that's given us longevity and credibility is definitely Children of the Ghetto. That's given us what me and Eddie always strive for.
Ghetto may have given the band the critical success they so dearly wanted, but in 1977, what they and their record company really needed was another big hit.
Tony Hall phoned and said, can you write another song for the boys? Because, they're writing good songs, but they're just not getting... We think you've got more of a poppy influence.
So we came up with this song, Whenever You Want My Love. Make no bones about that. That was written purely to get them back into the charts, which it did. After that, it became much, much more of a collaborative effort between all of us.
With the band firmly back in the charts, an opportunity came for them to make their debut on the cinema screen.
In 1977, we were invited to take part in the first all-black movie, and this movie was called Black Joy.
From Liverpool, the real thing.
There was a black film that you could go to the cinema and see.
Anything black, understand this, right? Anything black that was made, we knew about.
It was the first time you had all British black actors and singers and The Real Thing performed in it. So it was very original.
So we've done Black Joy, and afterwards now we're invited to do another movie with Joan Collins, you know?
To be involved with 2 movies, you know, is just amazing, just amazing.
Well, I mean, just being invited to do a movie with Joan Collins was like sent us up into the atmosphere, do you know what I'm saying? We were made up, we were dead excited.
The song we did in the stud was a song called Let's Go Disco, which, in all honesty, I didn't like at all.
When we heard the word Let's Go Disco, we thought,
We were promised that song would not be released, the Let's Go Disco.
We get a call from the record company. They want to cash in on the movie and release it. We were absolutely horrified.
I couldn't stand that bloody song.
The Real Thing might have hated the track, but by the end of the 1970s, disco music had taken over the entire world.
I like good disco. I hate really bad disco.
I thought it was basically Mickey Mouse music, to tell you the truth.
We've never aimed to write anything for the disco market.
People have been dancing and they always will be dancing. That's what the Lord gave us legs for, not just for walking.
The best example of Eddie and I writing something with chart potential was Can You Feel the Force?
I went to see the movie Star Wars, and basically it's a totally amazing movie. And the first thing that hit me watching Star Wars was, Can You Feel the Force?
It was quite obvious that Can You Feel the Force was going across everywhere, and that was going to be huge.
In my opinion, it's one of the best message songs of all time. There's a mood going on around the world today. It's with you in your wear or at your play. They're cleaning up the streets throughout the world. Ghetto folk have had their plight and fail. What's disco about that?
I think that the funky disco track done by The Real Thing, Can You Feel the Force, is something which lands on the good side of the disco fence.
What I did not think it was a disco record, to me it made sense of who The Real Thing was and all the positive things that they've been trying to say in their music.
Can You Feel the Force? Wow. Ha! Wow. And I love the message too.
Seems it was put on anywhere. People are up. And yeah.
That was it. That was my first 12-inch I ever bought from The Real Thing. It's Can You Feel the Force?
I think Ray felt he didn't have as much of a influence in what was going to be released. He used to sing Feed the Horse. He wouldn't say Feed the Force, he'd sing that on stage.
I remember we were working with the Jacksons and we had Feel the Force out. And I always remember I phoned up for the sales for that and we'd done 47,000 records.
Who would ever have believed that one day I'd be in a band that would work with the Jackson 5 and Michael Jackson and we'd be actually over them in the chart. It was totally amazing. It was an amazing vibe for us.
What a great record, boys. Fucking hell.
Unfortunately, the global success of Feel the Force didn't reignite the band's popularity for long. By the start of the electronic 80s, the boys' soulful sound was suddenly out of fashion.
Around about 1980, the group hit what you would call a decline. Our sales just started to drop. And then you start panicking, you start putting things out that really, you shouldn't really put out, you know.
It's the luck of the draw, really. You know, you release a song and either people embrace it and they love it or they don't.
The start of it is that our relationship with Ken was broken.
There was this chap who was hot at the time because he was making disco records. And I thought, what are they making records with that wanker for?
We just went into complete decline, but we always thought in our own mind, if we keep our heads, we will get back.
In 1983, David Essex came to the boys' rescue, offering them a lucrative tour of South Africa, a decision they would very soon learn to regret.
If I was asked what was the sort of like the lowest point in my whole career in show business, I'd have to say it was like the band going to South Africa.
We were a bit naive at the time. We were going to Sun City. We were assured that everything was okay in Sun City. It was blacks, whites, everyone was okay in Sun City.
I wouldn't knock anyone that go. They never saw it. Their financial circumstances might have been different to mine. But I personally didn't go. But neither would I condemn anyone that went.
I don't think the band had a choice. They were backing David Essex, really. And I would imagine the way they got treated out there, you know, what can you do?
A lot of black people there who worked at Sun City were actually quite frightened of talking to us, of being honest with us. They thought that we were part of the system, which made me feel really ashamed.
Ray told me that they were granted honorary white status as black guys, and that just, he couldn't believe that.
I think the tour that The Real Thing and I did in South Africa was successful, but it didn't rub the authorities up the wrong way, but I think they were a bit miffed by it.
We thought it would be fantastic to go there and sing Children of the Ghetto. For us, making our own little statement.
It's all a white audience. The only black people there were the security people.
That's when it really dawned on us what a cock-up, right, and a shithole of a mistake we've made coming to such a place.
Then when we got home, there was a lot of trouble.
I'm basically really, truly sorry that we ever went there. That was a mistake.
It wasn't going to happen again with us, with David, really.
Even now, today, I wish I could sort of like roll back the clock, and sort of, so we could just say, no, we ain't going.
After 3 years in the doldrums, out of the blue, the band was thrown a lifeline to resuscitate their career.
We knew we were in trouble. We weren't working, basically, right? We were still together, but not working.
We get a phone call from our manager and said, they're re-releasing You To Me Are Everything. Me and Eddie listened to it, just threw it away. We just started laughing. We thought, that's a load of crap.
When I heard the finished product, I thought, I don't think this is going to do anything.
About 2 weeks later, our manager phoned up and said, you know, the remix? I says, yeah. It's come back in the charts.
A week later, we were back on top of the pops doing it. And it was just like, this is crazy. It's all happening all over again.
After we'd done Top of the Pops, the thing just took off again. 15, 20,000, it was mad.
Not only had it come back into the charts, it rose as quickly as it did the first time.
And then they'd done the same thing again with Can't Get By, and the same thing happened, right? They'd done the same thing again with Can You Feel the Force, the same thing. It was like as though they shifted 76 into 86.
There's been this sudden interest, do you think, in the real thing after all these years?
Well, what it is, we started out as little babies, you know, we're slightly older now. We look better now.
We're matured
now. More elegant now.
And the records have matured with us.
Yeah, there is an interest in
The 80s was the golden age of British pop. I thought they were an 80s band. I just can't believe that they were going for so long before the 80s, you know?
10 years on, and it's just, someone's looking down on us.
But this time, no mistakes.
As the group rejoiced in their unexpected comeback, once again, Ray struggled with fame and his addictions.
In 1986, we once again got like a huge break. But I'll always remember Gail, his wife, coming up to me and saying, I'm made up, it's happened, but I'm really worried about Ray.
So there was this kind of thing where you're on a council estate and the records had been re-released, so it didn't quite go with what you had.
We talked Ray back on the road and he did. Again, it's old habits die hard because I think he'd straightened himself out.
There was a lot of money coming in. All these people started flocking around him again. He was the centre of attraction in his crowd.
It always shocked me how many people that Ray had round him at the gigs. And you could look at some of these people and you could think, trouble.
I remember once he went missing for 3 days and I was just thinking, oh, he's dead. He'd met some girl and he'd ended up in Birmingham. He just walked in the door and I'd had the police, filing a missing persons. I was like, well, where were you,
Oh, but you can see it in the eyes. If you just look at Ray, you can see he's not there. He's spaced. That was his escape.
I think a lot of the time he was stoned.
It must have been a nightmare for him, having to sort of like come out and perform with us. And he must have felt awful.
He'd get in the car and he'd just be gone, So we noticed a decline there.
I didn't really know that Ray had a drug problem until I met him at a Stevie Wonder concert. Right out of the blue, he said, do you want a line? And I politely refused.
He was okay for quite a while, but every now and again he would want to slip back into that. And I don't know if it was because he found it fun or because he just had no choice. It was just in his makeup.
So many different artists I know had these problems because they get to a point of anxiety. They don't know how to deal with it, so they find a different outlet. I've seen a lot of people who've destroyed themselves.
Pop stars are pop stars. I've never seen a musician as a role model. But we're going to label black artists that have to be role models. Every white musician isn't seen as a role model. Why does a black artist have to be a role model? Some of them make their best music high as a kite.
And Chris told me that Ray had been arrested. He'd been caught trying to take drink out of the bar. When I got to the station now, they took me downstairs to the holding cells, and Ray was just standing there and he was literally screaming. But that was the beginning of a very, very long line of problems with Ray. This scenario would be reenacted in different ways right down through the years.
I think he was hurt inside, you know, and I don't think a lot of people knew it, but in hindsight, I think he was hurting all the time.
Here with Hard Times, welcome The Real Thing.
In 1987, Eddie, Chris, Dave and Ray made their very last TV appearance as a four-piece. By this time, Ray's drug addiction had ravaged his body and it couldn't be disguised any longer.
If you actually look back at the performance now, you could see that Ray was in trouble. He bore no relation to the Ray of You To Me Are Everything.
Started to look like he'd lost a bit of weight. And I was part of that as well. So we'd started taking heroin by then.
That was most probably at the beginning of the end for him, to be honest.
You just had to do it. You got to try everything, and Ray didn't. He just went a step too far and he got hooked on some bad stuff.
You know, we were mixing with people who were crackheads, you know, and we were having those kind of people in our house. When you're using drugs like that, you're so alienated and you can't, it's so far removed from normal life. We sold things to get drugs. We were committing crime to get drugs. We were doing things like credit card fraud.
People get into drugs that far and then all of a sudden they've lost control.
There was times when I'd go and see him and I'd never heard of Chasing the Dragon. My images of him, silver paper and doing that, you know, and was it the fame making him do it, or was it rebellion against all the institutionalized stuff that was going on?
Ray had already twice avoided jail for drug offences, but things finally came to a head during the band's 1991 European tour, when his erratic behaviour was making him unreliable and often out of control.
We watched him just going from bad to worse, and it was sad because there was nothing we could do to help him. There was nothing anybody could do.
He said to me, he said, I'm gonna die early. That really scared me. It's almost like he knew. He said, I'm gonna die early, Gail. Yeah.
We went through all our hit career and everything with him, and we managed it. And it wasn't until the end when it became unmanageable.
It's pretty much every performance that we were doing, he'd be smashed off his head, and sometimes he'd just be standing there on stage and just way out of it.
It really come to a head when we were in Germany, and it got to a point where it couldn't be hidden anymore, and we told him he was out.
When Ray was sacked from the band, I don't think he was shocked by it, really. I think he did feel really betrayed.
Ray's problems began when he was a kid, continued through his life. He was never actually able to be free from them.
I mean, Ray had everything that you would want. He had a great voice, he was great looking, he had a great personality with all the girls and things like that. He was great on stage, and he let it all go.
Within months of Ray's sacking, he was arrested back in Liverpool, this time for burgling houses in the city in order to feed his spiralling drug addiction.
He made the front page of the Echo and Ray Lake of the Real Thing addict. And then it gave our address, our names, where we lived. And then it was what we were charged with. fraud, deception, and Ray got maybe like a couple of months prison for robbing a house or something to get money to get drugs.
I'm not sure whether he said he liked it, but it was almost as if he was saying, like, you know, at least I get a fucking decent night's sleep.
In 1992, in an attempt to save their marriage, Ray, Gail and their baby daughter relocated nearly 300 miles away to the seaside resort of Brighton.
Brighton was quite unique, very forgiving place, but Ray just carried on drinking, and then my father came down to see me and him and my dad went out this night for a drink and Ray didn't come home. Ray was with another woman and it was just like, after all we'd been through, you know, and he'd gone off with another woman and then he went missing for a week.
Gail and Ray eventually divorced after spending 20 years together. Ray married another woman, 18 years his junior, but sadly it was to be another tumultuous relationship.
Well, Ray ended up in jail again after, you know, an argument with his wife and she pressed charges against him. And then he was sent on to a bail hostel in Bristol. He phoned me up from there, I think about a week before he died. I think it just must have been too much for him, really. He injected himself with heroin, that's how he... And he hadn't used for years, so he knew he was going to... And he knew that. And it was a very definite, committed... He wrote a letter for my daughter.
I wished I knew the stuff I know now about mental health. I most probably could have helped Ray.
There's a mate here, you know, who's just died tragically in a foreign place to me.
He just checked out. He just had enough. It was always on the cards with Ray. He was just self-destruct. He was just on self-destruct.
It was very, very sad finding out about that, because he was a great human being, a lovely guy.
What a terrible waste. And what a beautiful man. It makes me sad.
I am proud of Ray, just because of who he was. He was a really special, unique person. I still love Ray, and I think I will always love Ray.
After nearly half a century performing on stage, The Real Thing are still together and playing hundreds of sellout gigs every year.
Ray sadly is singing up in heaven somewhere, but the three of them are at it and still as good as they were.
The Real Thing, for me, 45 years, still touring. The hardest working band in show business, without a doubt.
Being a performer is a drug. It's a drug. It's something that's inside you that you cannot get rid of.
What keeps you going when you're older is that you realise why you're doing it. You're bringing happiness to an awful lot of people.
You might get old yourself, but basically your voice doesn't get old. The songs in a lot of ways get younger.
Their lyrics are timeless. It could be sung in any generation.
I mean, even when the guys are no longer with us, You to Me Are Everything is that one-of-a-kind song that will live forever.
And The Real Thing's still together as well. It's beautiful. I love it. I love you.
I'm sure all the women who go and see those gigs take 30 years off them when they're standing there going, oh, I remember swooning over him.
The ladies still, you know, have the eye for The Real Thing.
All I know is we're still here. We've still got credibility.
Children of the Ghetto still stands up today. It's one of the best songs we do. The proof is in the pudding. People who've recorded it. Courtney Pine, Mary J. Blige.
And when you see her sing that live, you know, you can hear a pin drop.
That song is too good not to be covered. It's an accolade, it's an endorsement of their work.
Children of the Ghetto is as powerful now, is as relevant now as it was then.
I think it's one of the most important songs that a British group has made in the last 50 years or so, because it comes from the heart.
It sometimes takes years later for you to understand the importance of songs that were written or why they were written. You don't get it at the time.
I would say the legacy of The Real Thing is, unlike all the other people who came out of Liverpool, they are the only ones who did write about Liverpool. not just about Penny Lane.
In terms of culture, The Real Thing are one of the most important bands in the history of British music.
They are the true pioneers of pop soul.
Without doubt, one of the best black bands to have come out of the UK.
So their artistry has been shown within their work, and their work has stood the test of time.
They lit the fire of anything that's come after, and once again, they're from Liverpool.
We are proud to have been a part of you, and that you represented us, and still do. The real thing, the real deal.
It's Friday night, here comes the weekend. Week's been a fight, I've been feeling low. So tired of working, each other God sends. No chance of shirking, the week's been so slow. I guess it's time to call my baby up. Tell her that I'm ready, she'll know. All of my friends are gonna be dressed up, looking the part. I'm ready to go. Here's how you gonna find us. Foot tapping, right on through the night. Right on through the night. Foot tapping till the early light. Foot tapping, right on through the night. We're gonna be foot tapping till the early light. Till the early light. Are you ready? To go foot tapping. Are you ready? I must confess, I don't earn a fortune. I don't possess no big account. All of my friends singing the same tune. Nobody earning no big amount. Working every day, live for the weekend. To spend our pay, I'll tell you why. This is a one night that we can pretend. Life ain't a fight, and we're riding high. Here's how you gonna find us. Foot tapping, right on through the night. Right on through the night. Foot tapping till the early light. Foot tapping, right on through the night. We're gonna be foot tapping till the early light. Till the early light. Are you ready? To go foot tapping. Are you ready?
The Real Thing originated with Dave and I, and unfortunately that's where it's ended up, but that's how it is and that's where it's going to be.
But we've got to go forward. And we're finding fun in finding that other level that me and Chris are going to be happy on.
Even now, we're still feeling the force of him with us when we're on stage.
Yeah, the force is still with us. The man.